What is going on, guys? Akers here again with another After Effects tutorial, and this one's on how to dissolve logo or text using Trapcode Particular. So this is a real fun one today, so let's go ahead and get started. The first step is to come up to our composition tab and select new composition. We're going to call this master underscore tutorial. You don't have to write tutorial, I'm just using it so we don't get confused. And the next step is to add a background, so we're going to come up to layer, new, solid, black. We're going to call this background, and then we're going to come up to our effects and presets, and we're going to type fill, and we're going to drag our fill onto our solid, and we're going to make the colour whatever colour you like, but I'm going to choose a nice dark blue. Okay, the next step would be to, if you're using a logo, maybe to import your logo or text. So I'm just going to drag my logo on here, and if I just quickly open this up, you can see it's just made it two text objects. And next we need to pre-compose this layer, so we can come up to layer, pre-compose, and we're going to call this placeholder. Move all attributes into the new composition. Okay, so now we have our master composition and our placeholder composition, which is holding our logo. And if we come back to our master composition, I'm going to pre-compose the placeholder again, so we come up to layer, pre-compose, and we're going to call this logo pre-comp. And the reason I'm doing this is because later on down the road it will make changing the logo or text just as simple as dragging and drop it into this placeholder composition. So that's the reason why we've pre-composed our logo 3 times. So the next step would be to maybe add a bit of colour. So you want to come over to your logo in the placeholder. Now you don't have to do this, maybe you have a coloured logo already, so you might need to skip this step, but otherwise we want to come select our logo, and then from the toolbar select effect, and we want generate ramp, and this is going to be a nice yellow colour. We'll make this one a little bit more orange. So there we go. Now we're ready to start playing with Particular. So what you want to do is come up to layer, new, solid, and we're going to call this solid Particular large. Make comp size, okay, and then we're going to come up to effect, Trapcode Particular. Now before we start playing with any of the settings, we need to set up the mask in which the particles will be generated from. So we can do that by coming over to our logo pre-comp, and I'm going to come up to our mask rectangle tool, zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to draw a nice thin mask on the placeholder composition. If we then open up the mask, we can set a keyframe for the mask path, and then move maybe 1.5 seconds, and then double click on the mask and drag it over to the right hand side of the screen, and now we have this animation of the mask going over the logo, and this is where the particles will be generated. And also we want to set the mask feather to 50 pixels, and then we want to come over back to our master composition, and now we can start playing with some of these settings of Particular. So first off, I'm going to drop down the emitter menu, and we're going to change the emitter type from point to layer, and I'm going to change my logo pre-comp to a 3D layer. And then we're going to come down to the layer emitter, and we're going to drop down that menu, and we're going to change layer from none to the logo pre-comp that we just made 3D, and we're going to say layer sampling. Instead of current time, we're going to change that to particle birth time, and we're going to leave the RGB values as the particle color. So that's it for now, and if we move to 0 frames, and we're going to need to bump up the particles so we can see them, so we're going to change the particles to something crazy, maybe 300,000. We do a quick RAM preview. There you can see the very basic effect. So now we want to change the velocity to 200 instead of 100, and that's going to make the particles explode a little bit further out. So we can close the emitter tab now and open up the particle tab and change the life to 2 seconds, and we're going to change the particle feather to 0. We're going to change the size. We're going to leave the size of 5, but we're going to change the size randomness to 100, and we're going to leave the opacity at 100 and the opacity randomness at 100 as well. And we're going to close up the particle menu and open up the physics menu, and I'm going to change the gravity to -500, and then we're going to open up the air menu, and we're going to set the air resistance to 1, and then we're going to change the wind X to -100. Now we can start to have some fun with the turbulence field, and the turbulence field is, if we have a look on our example, you can see that the particles get that really smoky, twisted effect. That's the turbulence field. So if we just drop down the turbulence field menu, and we're going to leave the effect size at 0, and we're going to change the effect position to something pretty high like 300. And then we're going to set the fading time to 0.1, and then the scale we're going to leave at 10, but we're going to change the complexity to 2, and then the octave multiplier, that's going to be 1, and then the octave scale is going to be 1 as well. And now we're going to change the evolution speed to 10, and then the evolution offset to 20, and that's pretty much, there we go, that's looking pretty cool. And there's one last thing that we could do, which is if we come down to the rendering menu and then drop down the motion blur and change motion blur from comp settings to on. That's going to give us some really sexy motion blur. So to make the small particles, all we have to do is Control C, Control V, or Command C, Command V if you're on a Windows computer, and we're going to rename this to particular small. And then all we have to do is select our particular small layer, and we're going to need to select the layer emitter again. So we're just going to select the logo pre-comp, the same as the large one, but we're going to come down to the physics tab. No, actually we're going to come down to the particle tab, and we're going to change the size to 2. And then we're going to change the random seed just to a random number. So that's going to give us a load of those small particles. We just do a RAM preview now. See how it's looking. There we go, it's looking pretty cool. Actually better than the example, so that's always nice. And then just the last step is we're going to add the, if we just drag our placeholder composition underneath our logo pre-comp. You can see that that adds the text underneath, and now what we need to do, we need to add a linear mask so that when the particles appear the text looks like it's dissolving. So to do that, all we need to do is simply come up to Effect, Transition, and we want CC. No, we just want Linear Wipe. And then if we add a keyframe to the transition completion, and then maybe move to 1.5 seconds, and then set the transition completion to 100%. And also we're going to change the feather to 50%, which is the same as our mask on our logo pre-comp. And if we just do a quick RAM preview now, you can see we get that really nice dissolving effect. So that pretty much wraps it up for today's tutorial. Hope you learned a little bit more about Trapcode Particular. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating, really appreciate it. And I will see you again very soon in another video.